I walked across the submarine training facility toward Building C, my assignment papers clutched in my sweaty palm. The building sat away from the main complex, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. 2 Marines stood at the entrance, checking IDs with the kind of focus that made my stomach twist. "Francis." "Justin." "Reporting as ordered." I handed over my paperwork to the first guard, who scanned it twice before waving me through. The inside looked nothing like the rest of the facility. Instead of the usual Navy-issue everything, this place had waxed floors and real artwork hanging on the walls. A receptionist in civilian clothes pointed me toward Conference Room 3, where I was supposed to wait. I sat there for 20 minutes, thinking through every possible reason they might have brought me here. Maybe I'd messed up somewhere. Maybe my sonar scores were too good, and they thought I was cheating. Maybe. The door opened and 4 officers walked in, their uniforms pressed sharp enough to cut glass. I spotted Commander Davis right away, but the others were strangers. The oldest one, a silver-haired admiral with more ribbons than I could count, took the chair directly across from me. "Petty Officer Francis," he said without any warm-up. "I'm Admiral Jackson Turner. Your submarine assignment has been modified." Changed. Not canceled, not switched. Changed. The word hung in the air like smoke. "You're being reassigned to a classified special operations vessel designated SSV-1, Commander Davis added, sliding a manila folder across the table. "The mission details remain classified until you report for duty." I stared at the folder without touching it. "Sir, I was expecting submarine duty, but this sounds—" "What this sounds like," Admiral Turner interrupted, "is an opportunity. Your sonar performance during training was exceptional. You demonstrated an ability to identify marine life patterns that frankly surprised your instructors." Commander Davis leaned forward. "Before we proceed, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. This assignment requires a level of security clearance and personal commitment that goes far beyond standard naval service." She pulled out a thick document and set it in front of me. 23 pages of legal text with non-disclosure agreement printed across the top in bold letters. "Every aspect of your new assignment is classified," another officer explained. "Mission parameters, vessel specifications, operational procedures, personnel involved, everything." I picked up the first page and started reading. The language was thick with legal jargon, packed with phrases like federal prosecution and violation of national security statutes. My palms were getting damp. "Take your time," Admiral Turner said, though his tone suggested I shouldn't take too much time. The document covered everything I could think of and plenty I couldn't. No talking about the mission with family, friends, or other military personnel not directly involved. No keeping personal records or journals about operations. No contact with media or researchers about anything related to the assignment. The penalties section went on for 3 full pages. "Sir, can you tell me what kind of special operations we're talking about?" I asked, looking up from the papers. Admiral Turner's expression didn't change. "Your sonar expertise makes you uniquely qualified for this particular mission. That's all you need to know for now." I read through the entire agreement twice, my thoughts spinning. This was so far from the marine biology research I'd dreamed about that it felt like stepping into another world entirely. But it was also exactly the kind of opportunity Wesley had hinted at. Special assignments. Not everyone ends up on regular subs. If I sign this, what happens next? "You'll be given 48 hours leave to handle any personal affairs," Commander Davis said. "Then you report to Travis Air Force Base for transport to your deployment location." "And if I don't sign?" Admiral Turner's smile was thin. Then you'll get your original submarine assignment and serve out your enlistment as planned. But opportunities like this don't come around twice, Petty Officer. I picked up the pen they'd placed next to the document. My grandfather's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, marking seconds that felt like hours. He'd served in classified operations during World War II, taking secrets to his grave that our family never learned about. Maybe this was what military service really meant. I signed my name on the final page. Admiral Turner stood up and raised his right hand. Repeat after me. I solemnly swear that I will not divulge, publish, or reveal any classified information relating to my assignment aboard SSV-1. The oath went on for 2 full minutes. Each word pressed down on me, but I repeated everything exactly as he said it. Commander Davis handed me another manila envelope, this one marked "Eyes Only" in red letters. Don't open this until you reach your deployment location. The instructions inside will tell you everything you need to know about reporting for duty. Any breach of secrecy will result in court-martial and federal prosecution, the third officer added, his voice completely matter-of-fact. These aren't empty threats, Petty Officer. We take operational security very seriously. Admiral Turner gathered his papers. You have 48 hours to put your affairs in order. Use that time wisely, but remember, complete silence about your new assignment isn't just expected, it's mandatory. They filed out of the room, leaving me alone with the sealed envelope and a head full of questions I wasn't allowed to ask. I sat there for a few minutes, turning the envelope over. The paper was thicker than usual, and something solid pressed against the inside. When I finally walked out of Building C, the regular training facility looked different somehow. Smaller, less important. The other trainees were probably getting their submarine assignments right now, heading off to serve on vessels they could write home about. I slipped the envelope inside my jacket and walked back to the barracks. Wesley sat on his bunk, working on his boots with the kind of focus that meant his mind was somewhere else. Completely. How'd it go? He asked without looking up. Can't talk about it. He nodded like that was exactly the answer he'd expected. Figured as much. Some assignments are like that. I wanted to ask him how he knew, what he'd heard, whether he'd been through something similar, but that oath was still fresh in my mind, and I was already learning how secrecy worked. You didn't just keep quiet about the big things. You kept quiet about everything, because you never knew which small detail might matter. 48 hours to get ready for something I couldn't even begin to imagine. I pulled out my phone to call my parents, then stopped. What was I supposed to tell them? That I was going on a classified mission I couldn't discuss, to do work I couldn't describe, with people I couldn't name. I put the phone away and started packing instead. Whatever SSV-1 was, whatever this mission involved, I was committed now. The envelope in my jacket seemed to weigh more with each passing minute, but I didn't dare open it early. Some rules I was learning weren't meant to be broken. I walked out of Building C with the sealed envelope tucked in my jacket pocket, my head spinning from everything that had just happened. The regular training facility looked different now, smaller somehow, like I was seeing it through the wrong end of a telescope. Other trainees were probably getting their submarine assignments right about now, heading off to serve on vessels they could actually write home about. That oath pressed down on me like a weight. Every word Admiral Turner had made me repeat felt carved into my memory. I solemnly swear that I will not divulge, publish, or reveal any classified information relating to my assignment aboard SSV-1. SSV-1. Even the designation sounded ominous. I made it back to the barracks where Wesley was sitting on his bunk, cleaning his boots with the kind of focused attention that meant his mind was somewhere else entirely. He looked up when I walked in. and I could see the question in his eyes before he even opened his mouth. "How'd it go?" he asked, going back to his boots like the answer didn't really matter. "Can't talk about it." He nodded like that was exactly what he'd expected to hear. Figured as much. Some assignments are like that. I wanted to ask him how he knew, what he'd heard, whether he'd been through something similar himself. But the legal document I'd just signed was 23 pages of reasons why I couldn't ask those questions, and Wesley's casual response told me he already understood the rules of this particular game. I pulled out my phone to call my parents, then stopped with my finger hovering over Mom's contact. What was I supposed to tell her? That I was going on a classified mission I couldn't discuss, to do work I couldn't describe, with people I couldn't name? She'd been so excited when I told her about the submarine assignment, already planning to brag to her colleagues about her son serving on a research vessel. The phone slipped back into my pocket. 48 hours leave, I said to Wesley, more to fill the silence than because I thought he cared. That's not much time. He set down his boot and looked at me directly. You might want to think about what you really need to take care of before you go. There was something in his tone that made me listen. Not advice exactly, but the kind of suggestion that came from experience I didn't have yet. I started grabbing clothes from my locker, trying to figure out what you pack for a classified mission to an unknown location. The envelope crinkled every time I moved, reminding me that somewhere inside was information I wasn't allowed to know yet. The urge to rip it open was overwhelming, but Admiral Turner's words kept repeating. These aren't empty threats, Petty Officer. We take operational security very seriously. Wesley, I said, folding a shirt with more care than it needed. When you mentioned special assignments before, were you talking about stuff like this? He went quiet for a while, long enough that I figured he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Let's just say not everyone ends up on regular subs. Some people get picked for different kinds of work. Different how? The kind where you can't talk about it afterward. I stopped packing and looked at him. Wesley was staring at his boots again, but his hands had gone still. There was something he wasn't saying, something that sat in the space between his words like a warning. Is there anything I should know? I asked. Anything you can tell me? Wesley stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the training facility where everything still looked normal and safe. Just remember that once you sign those papers, you're committed. Whatever happens out there, you can't unsign them. You can't take back what you learn. The way he said it made my stomach twist, like he was talking about more than just paperwork and security clearances. I finished packing in silence, Wesley's words turning over in my mind. The envelope seemed to grow heavier every time I touched it, packed with more than just orders and instructions, packed with a door I couldn't walk back through once I opened it. That night, I couldn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling while my grandfather's watch ticked away on my wrist. He'd worked classified ops during World War II, carried secrets to his grave that our family never knew about. I'd always wondered what those secrets were. What kind of job needed that much silence? Now I was about to find out. 48 hours to get my life in order, Admiral Turner had said. But how do you prepare for something you can't even picture? How do you say goodbye when you can't tell anyone where you're going or why? I rolled over and tried to sleep, but my thoughts kept returning to Wesley's warning. You can't take back what you learn. The envelope sat on my nightstand in the dark, waiting. I crossed the tarmac at Travis Air Force Base with my duffel bag and a head full of questions I wasn't supposed to ask. The transport plane waiting for us looked like any other military aircraft, but the 12 other personnel boarding with me had that same careful quiet I was getting used to. Nobody mentioned where we were going. Nobody said much at all. The flight stretched on for 14 hours with a fuel stop in Hawaii, where we all stayed on board under guard. I tried to sleep, but kept thinking about Wesley's warning. You can't take back what you learn. The envelope in my jacket pocket seemed to grow heavier with each mile we traveled. We finally landed on a tiny airstrip that looked like it had been cut out of jungle. Nothing but military buildings as far as I could see, all painted the same dull green that meant serious business. The air hit me like a wall when I stepped off the plane, thick and humid with that salt smell that meant we were near water. A sergeant with a clipboard checked our names and pointed us toward a convoy of unmarked vehicles. Still no explanations. Still no small talk. Just orders and movement, and the growing sense that I was being pulled deeper into something I couldn't back out of. The ride to the pier took 20 minutes through what looked like a military installation that didn't officially exist. No signs, no base name, just buildings and personnel who all had that same careful look in their eyes. When we reached the waterfront, I tore open my sealed orders. The paper was thick, official, and brief. Report to Pier 7 for immediate boarding of SSV-1. Present orders to duty officer. Maintain operational security at all times. I walked down the concrete pier with my gear, and that's when I got my first look at the vessel. SSV-1 didn't match any Navy design I'd studied. The thing was sleek and gunmetal gray, maybe 400 feet long, with sharp edges that seemed built to deflect more than just radar. No visible markings, no standard Navy identification numbers. The hull had this weird matte finish that seemed to swallow light rather than bounce it back. Equipment I couldn't identify stuck out from the superstructure at weird angles. Antenna arrays that looked more like modern art than communication gear. Sensor domes that were way too big for standard navigation. Everything about the ship screamed stealth and special purpose. I walked up the gangway where a petty officer checked my papers twice before nodding me aboard. "Petty Officer Natalie Aguilar," she said, extending a hand. "Welcome to the weird side of the Navy." She led me through narrow corridors crammed with high-tech equipment. Screens and control panels covered every wall, most displaying data I couldn't make sense of. The entire ship buzzed with electrical activity that felt nothing like standard vessels. 36 specialists total, Aguilar explained as we walked. Everyone here has clearance for this kind of work. Ship runs under strict radio silence and tight communication rules. You'll get used to it. She stopped at a door marked sonar and waved me inside. The room was smaller than I'd expected, but packed with equipment that made my training consoles look like toys. Multiple displays, processing units that probably cost more than my parents' house, and acoustic arrays that could likely hear a fish sneeze from 50 miles away. "This is your domain," she said. "Hope you're as good as your file says you are." Before I could ask what my file said, footsteps sounded in the corridor behind us. A man in his 40s with captain's bars and tired eyes appeared in the doorway. "Captain Morris Reynolds," he said, offering a firm handshake. "You must be Francis. Heard good things about your sonar work." "Thank you, sir. Your skills are going to be key to whatever we're running out here," he said, looking around the sonar room with the expression of someone who'd seen too much. "Aguilar will get you settled. We ship out in 6 hours." He started to go, then turned back. "Francis, whatever you think you know about standard naval operations, forget it. This is different." After he left, I stood in the sonar room surrounded by technology I was excited to understand and questions I wasn't allowed to ask. Through the porthole, I could see other ships at distant piers, all with the same unmarked angular design as SSV-1. Aguilar was watching me take it all in. "First time on a special operations ship?" "First time on any vessel," I admitted. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, you picked a hell of a way to start your naval career." I put my gear down and looked at the sonar displays, already picturing what they might show me in the deep Pacific waters we were heading toward. Whatever SSV-1 was built to find, my job was going to be listening for it in the dark. The ship's engines fired up with a low rumble that I felt in my bones. 6 hours until we headed out for a mission I still knew nothing about, aboard a vessel that officially didn't exist, with a crew trained for work they couldn't talk about. I was committed now. Whatever came next, there was no going back. I sat in the ship's briefing room with my notebook open, trying to look professional while my stomach churned from the constant rolling motion. 12 hours out from port, and I was still getting used to being on an actual vessel instead of a training simulator. The other crew members came in around me, 36 specialists who all seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Captain Reynolds walked to the front of the room carrying a thick folder and looking like he hadn't slept much. The easy confidence he'd shown when I first met him was gone, replaced by something tougher. "All right, people. Time to talk about why we're really out here." He opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs, laying them across the table for everyone to see. The images showed mangled metal, hull sections ripped apart like tissue paper, and wreckage scattered across black water. 7 ships in 6 months, he said. Cargo vessels, fishing boats, 1 Coast Guard cutter, all destroyed in a 500 square mile area of the Pacific. No survivors. No distress calls that made any sense. I leaned forward to get a better look at the photos. The damage didn't look like anything I'd seen in training materials about collisions or explosions. The metal was crushed inward, like something massive had grabbed these ships and squeezed. "What we're dealing with," Reynolds continued, "is an unknown sea creature. Something big enough and strong enough to take down vessels up to 300 feet in length. Something that can move underwater at speeds over 60 knots. Aguilar raised her hand. "Sir, what kind of creature are we talking about? Whale? Giant squid?" "That's the problem, Petty Officer. We don't know." He pulled out more images, sonar readings that showed massive contacts appearing and disappearing without warning. The thing seems to have advanced hiding abilities. It can avoid visual detection almost completely, which is why our sonar specialist is critical to this mission. All eyes turned to me. I felt my face get hot and focused on taking notes instead of looking back at anyone. Reynolds started handing out equipment I'd never seen before. Modified depth charges that looked more like high-tech torpedoes. Electromagnetic pulse devices about the size of a football. Emergency beacon transmitters that were way more advanced than standard Navy gear. "Previous attempts to study or capture this creature have failed," he said, his voice getting grimmer. "We've recovered broken distress signals, pieces of equipment, and not much else. Whatever this thing is, it's smart enough to avoid most detection and powerful enough to destroy anything that gets too close." A tall, thin man with glasses and civilian clothes stood up from the back of the room. "Dr. Bryson Hunt, Marine Biology," he said by way of introduction. "Based on the damage patterns and sonar data, we're looking at something at least 200 feet in length. The attack behaviors suggest intelligence and possibly territorial instincts. This doesn't match any known species in our databases." 200 feet. I tried to picture something that huge moving through the water, and my brain just couldn't handle it. The biggest whale I'd ever read about was maybe 100 feet long, and those were gentle giants that ate krill. "The creature shows hunting patterns," Dr. Hunt continued. "It targets vessels of specific sizes, attacks with precision, and leaves no survivors. This suggests predatory behavior rather than defensive reactions." My hand was cramping from writing so fast, but I didn't want to miss anything. This was exactly the kind of marine biology work I'd dreamed about, except it was also the most terrifying thing I'd ever heard. Captain Reynolds took back control of the briefing. Our orders are clear. Find this creature, track its movements, and eliminate the threat using any means necessary. This mission is classified at the highest levels of national security. What we're dealing with could cause mass panic if it became public knowledge. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each of us. I know this isn't what most of you signed up for, but right now, we're the only thing standing between this creature and more innocent people getting killed. The room was completely silent, except for the ship's engines and the sound of water against the hull. I couldn't stop thinking about those photos of wrecked vessels, trying to picture what could cause that kind of destruction. Questions? Reynolds asked. A petty officer near the front raised his hand. Sir, do we have any idea what this thing wants? Why it's going after ships? Unknown, Reynolds replied. Could be territorial, could be hunting behavior, could be something else entirely. That's part of what we're here to figure out. Another crew member spoke up. What's our backup if the standard weapons don't work? Reynolds pointed to the electromagnetic devices. These are experimental, built to mess with bioelectric fields in large marine animals. If conventional weapons fail, we try those. If those fail, he stopped. We call for backup and try to survive long enough for it to arrive. The way he said it made my stomach drop. This wasn't a research mission with some danger involved. This was a hunt, and we might end up being the prey. Dr. Hunt cleared his throat. I should mention that the creature's ability to avoid detection suggests highly developed sensory systems. It may be aware of our presence long before we detect it. Great. So we were hunting something bigger than our ship, faster than our ship, smart enough to plan attacks, and it probably already knew we were here. Reynolds started gathering the photos. We'll reach the target area in 18 hours. I want everyone familiar with the emergency procedures and the special equipment. Francis, I need you watching sonar around the clock in rotating shifts with Aguilar. If this thing is out there, you two are going to be our early warning system. The briefing broke up with people heading to their stations, but I stayed in my chair for a minute, staring at my notes. Everything I'd written looked like something out of a monster movie, not a real Navy mission. Aguilar stopped beside my chair. You okay, Francis? You look a little green. Just processing, I said, closing my notebook. This is way different from what I expected. Yeah, well, welcome to Special Operations. Nothing's ever what you expect. I followed her out of the briefing room, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't ask and answers I probably didn't want to hear. Somewhere out there in the Pacific, something was waiting for us. Something that had already killed dozens of people and destroyed millions of dollars worth of ships. And my job was to find it. I stared at the sonar display for the fourth straight hour, watching the same patterns play out across the green screen. Schools of fish swimming in their usual formations, the occasional whale song carrying from miles away. Our own ship's signature reflecting back from the ocean floor 3,000 feet below us. Nothing that wanted to kill us. Aguilar showed up beside my station with 2 cups of coffee, both looking like they'd been sitting in the pot since yesterday. Anything interesting out there? Just the usual suspects, I said, accepting the coffee even though it tasted like motor oil. Some kind of whale pod about 15 miles northeast. Probably humpbacks, based on the acoustic signature. She pulled up a chair and settled in for her shift. You know, before this assignment, I thought sonar work would be boring as hell, just sitting here listening to fish swim around. It usually is, I admitted. This is actually the most normal part of what we're doing out here. 4 days of nothing but routine. 4 days of textbook marine behavior, the kind I'd memorized during training, all happening beneath water that seemed calm and ordinary from above. If I didn't know what we were really after, I could almost imagine this was the research trip I'd dreamed about. But Captain Reynolds kept showing up in the sonar room every few hours, wearing that same worried look, asking if we'd picked up anything strange. And Dr. Hunt wouldn't stop dropping by with fresh ideas about electrical disruption and creatures that could blend into their surroundings. Theories that made my stomach turn. "I'm going to grab some food," I told Aguilar. "Call me if anything bigger than a tuna shows up." The mess hall was nearly empty, except for a few crew members picking at their dinner and talking in low voices. Everyone had that same careful look in their eyes, like they were waiting for something that might catch us off guard. I sat down with a tray of food I didn't really want and tried to focus on eating instead of thinking about the photos from the briefing. Those mangled metal hulls and debris fields spread across dark water. Ships that had been going about their normal business until something huge decided they didn't belong there anymore. Dr. Hunt walked in carrying a stack of papers and looking like he hadn't slept since we left port. He saw me and came over, putting his materials down on the table. "Francis, right? The sonar specialist?" "Yes, sir. I've been reviewing the acoustic data from the previous attacks," he said, spreading out charts covered with wave patterns and frequency analyses. "There's something I want you to look at." The data showed normal ocean background noise, wave action, thermal layers, the usual acoustic environment you'd expect in deep Pacific waters. But Dr. Hunt pointed to subtle changes in the readings, tiny irregularities that could easily be missed. "See these fluctuations? They appear in the recordings from all 7 attack sites, always in the hours before the ships were destroyed." I studied the charts more carefully. The variations were so tiny, they looked like equipment noise or natural interference. "What am I looking for?" "Something massive using the natural sounds to mask its movement," he said. "Like acoustic camouflage. The creature might be timing its approach to coincide with wave patterns or thermal shifts that would hide its signature." The idea was brilliant and terrifying all at once. We were hunting something clever enough to turn the entire ocean into its hiding place. "How would we detect something like that?" "By looking for what's not there instead of what is," Dr. Hunt said. "Gaps in the normal patterns. Spaces where the background noise gets too perfect." I finished eating while studying his charts, trying to memorize the subtle signatures he was showing me. When I got back to the sonar room, Aguilar was scowling at her display. "Got something weird about 20 minutes ago," she said. "Thought I picked up a large contact moving parallel to our course, but it disappeared before I could get a clear reading." "How large?" "Big enough to matter. But it could have been a whale diving deep, or thermal interference, or my imagination." I took over the console and started reviewing the recorded data from her shift. There was something there, a brief acoustic shadow that appeared and vanished in less than 30 seconds. Too quick for a whale, too big for anything else I could think of. "I'm going to run this through the pattern analysis Dr. Hunt showed me," I said, pulling up the comparison software. The results made my coffee taste even worse. The acoustic shadow matched the subtle signatures from the attack sites, suggesting something massive had been moving through the water near our position, something that knew how to hide. I called the bridge and reported my findings to Captain Reynolds. Within 10 minutes, he was standing in the sonar room looking at the data himself. "How confident are you about this reading?" 60%, I said honestly. "It could be natural interference, but the pattern matches what Dr. Hunt found in the previous attack data." Reynolds stared at the display for several seconds. "From now on, we keep active sonar running nonstop. I want to know about anything bigger than a dolphin within 5 miles of this ship." Sir, active sonar will announce our position to anything listening. Good, he said grimly. Maybe it's time we stopped being the hunters and started being the bait. After he left, I sat staring at the sonar display with a new understanding of our situation. We weren't just looking for a creature that could destroy ships. We were hunting something that had been watching us, learning our patterns, maybe even following us through these empty waters. The ocean suddenly felt a lot less empty. Aguilar was watching me work through this realization. You okay, Francis? Just thinking about what Dr. Hunt said, about looking for what's not there. Yeah, well, right now I'd settle for finding what is there before it finds us. I fired up the active sonar array and watched the pulses push out into the black water around us. Somewhere out there, something was picking up those same signals, probably figuring out everything it needed to know about what we could do and where we were weak. The hunt was definitely on. I just wasn't sure anymore who was hunting whom. The sonar display lit up like Christmas morning at 03:47 hours, and my coffee cup hit the floor before my brain even processed what I was seeing. A huge contact, moving fast, really fast. Holy shit, I whispered, then caught myself and started running calculations. The signature was solid, dense, measuring approximately 180 feet from nose to tail. Depth 800 feet and rising. Speed 73 knots. 73 knots. Nothing in the ocean moved that fast except torpedoes. My fingers danced across the console, checking the readings again because this had to be a malfunction. But the numbers didn't budge. Something the size of a destroyer was racing toward us from the deep, and we had maybe 90 seconds before it got here. I grabbed the comm and hit the bridge frequency. Bridge, sonar, emergency contact bearing 047, range 12,000 yards, and closing fast. Captain Reynolds' voice came back right away. How fast, Francis? 73 knots, sir. Depth 400 feet and still rising. Contact length approximately 180 feet. Dead silence on the comm for about 3 seconds. Then Reynolds' voice, sharp and controlled. All hands, emergency stations. Helm hard to port. Flank speed. I could feel the ship's engines roar beneath my feet, but our top speed was 35 knots. We were trying to outrun something twice as fast as us. The math was simple and scary as hell. The contact kept rising. 600 feet, 500, 400. Its path was a perfect intercept course, like it knew exactly where we were headed and when we'd arrive. Bridge, sonar, contact is maintaining intercept course. Time to impact approximately 40 seconds. Aguilar burst into the sonar room, her face white as a sheet. What the hell is that thing? I don't know, but it's big and it's coming right at us. The readings on my screen didn't match anything from my training manuals. Dense muscle mass, maybe armored skin based on the acoustic return. This wasn't a whale or giant squid. This was something completely different. 300 feet depth. 200. 100. Contact breaking surface, I shouted into the comm. The ship lurched violently to starboard as a massive displacement wave hit us. Through the sonar room's small porthole, I caught a glimpse of dark water erupting skyward about 200 yards off our bow. Something huge breached the surface, creating a wall of white foam that blocked out the stars. Voices from the deck crew started flooding the radio channels. Jesus Christ, look at the size of that thing. It's longer than our ship. I can see lights on it, bioluminescent markings. The creature vanished beneath the surface before I could spot it, but my sonar kept tracking, 400 feet down and moving in circles, actually circling us like we were prey. Captain Reynolds' voice cut through the radio chatter. All stations, prep the EMP charges. Francis, stay on that contact and keep calling out bearing changes. Contact bearing 090, range 800 yards, depth 400 feet, I reported, watching the massive signature move in a perfect circle around our position. It's maintaining a steady patrol pattern. Dr. Hunt's voice crackled over the comm from somewhere on deck. The glowing patterns suggest advanced neural development. This creature is studying us. Studying us. The thought made my stomach drop. We weren't just being hunted. We were being analyzed. Electromagnetic charges ready, someone reported from weapons control. Deploy charges, Reynolds ordered. I watched the small blips of the EMP devices drop into the water and explode in bright flashes on my sonar screen. The electromagnetic pulses should have disrupted any bioelectric fields in the creature's nervous system. The massive contact didn't even slow down. No effects, sir, I reported. Contact maintaining course and speed. The creature finished its second circle around us, and I could see the pattern was getting tighter. Each pass brought it closer to our hull. Contact changing course, I announced, my voice cracking slightly. Bearing 270, speed increasing to 80 knots. It's coming straight at us. All hands brace for impact, Reynolds shouted over the ship-wide comm. I watched the huge signature speed up straight toward our right side. The sonar return was so big it took up half my screen. Whatever this thing was, it was about to slam into us hard enough to crush us. Impact in 10 seconds, I yelled. The creature slammed into SSV-1 right at the middle with a sound like the world ending. The hit threw me hard against the sonar console, and I felt something sharp cut across my forehead as sparks shot from broken circuits all around me. The lights went out, and in the darkness, I could hear the hull moaning like a living thing in pain. The impact threw me into the sonar console so hard I felt my ribs crack. Metal sliced across my forehead, and warm blood ran down into my eyes as sparks shot from every circuit board around me. The lights went out, throwing us into complete darkness for about 3 seconds, before the emergency power came on with that sickly red glow that made everything look like a horror movie. The hull was screaming. That's the only way to describe the sound. Metal under stress beyond what it was built for, groaning and shrieking like something alive and in pain. Damage report. Captain Reynolds' voice cut through the chaos over the intercom. All stations, damage report now. I wiped blood from my eyes and tried to focus on what was left of my sonar display. Half the screen was dead, showing only static, but the other half still tracked our visitor. The massive signature sat directly beneath us, maybe 200 feet down, holding position like it was waiting for something. Engineering to bridge. We've got major flooding in compartments 3 and 4. The voice was tight with panic. Hull breach below the waterline. Pumps can't keep up. Medical to bridge. Casualties in the engine room. Need immediate assistance. The radio chatter kept coming, each report worse than the last, but I couldn't stop staring at my sonar screen. The creature wasn't moving away. It was just sitting there under us, like it was thinking. Captain Reynolds appeared in the sonar room doorway, his uniform torn and a nasty cut across his cheek. "Francis, what's our friend doing down there?" "Holding position directly beneath us, sir. Depth 200 feet. No movement for the last 90 seconds. Weapons control. Prepare depth charges for immediate deployment," Reynolds ordered into his radio. "Sir, depth charges at this range will damage our own hull," came the reply. "Our hull's already damaged. Fire when ready." I watched the small blips of the depth charges drop through the water toward the huge contact below us. They exploded in bright flashes on my screen, sending shock waves through the water that I could feel in my bones. The creature didn't even flinch. "No effect, sir," I reported. "Contact maintaining position." Dr. Hunt's voice crackled over the radio from somewhere up on deck. "Captain, I can see it from the observation platform. It's using some kind of appendages to examine the hull damage. The creature appears to be studying what it's done to us. Studying us. The word hit me like ice water. This thing wasn't just attacking randomly. It was learning. "All hands, prepare for second impact," Reynolds shouted into the ship-wide comm. The creature was moving again, climbing fast from its spot beneath us. I watched the massive signature speed upward, and this time I knew exactly what was coming. "Contact rising, bearing 180, speed 60 knots," I called out. "Impact in 15 seconds. The second hit came from behind, smashing into our stern hard enough to launch the bow clean out of the water. I heard the engine room blow apart, not just quit, but actually detonate in a blast of scorching steam and mangled metal. Screaming filled the intercom. "Engine room is gone," someone yelled over the radio. "4 confirmed dead. Engines offline. We're dead in the water." The ship lurched hard to the left as water poured into the blown-out back section. I had to grab the console to keep from sliding across the floor as everything loose started moving toward the low side. "All hands, abandon ship stations," Reynolds ordered. "Prepare lifeboats for immediate deployment." But even as he said it, we both knew the truth. The creature was still down there, making another pass around us according to my dying sonar. No lifeboat was going to make it 50 yards with that thing in the water. "Sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The creature's maintaining patrol pattern around our position. Launching boats would be suicide." Reynolds stared at the sonar display, watching the massive signature complete another circle around our sinking ship. His face looked grim in the red emergency lighting. "Then we're trapped," he said quietly. The ship groaned again, leaning further to port as the flooding spread. Water was already ankle-deep in the sonar room, and I could hear it rushing through the corridors outside. We had maybe 10 minutes before the whole ship went under. "Bridge to all stations," Reynolds said into his radio. "Prepare for third impact. All personnel move to starboard side, away from the list." I checked my sonar one more time. The creature was moving into position for another strike, this one targeting our port side where the flooding was worst. It knew exactly where to hit us to finish the job. "Contact bearing 090, speed increasing," I reported. "It's coming for the port side. All hands, brace for impact." The third hit was the worst. The creature slammed into us right at the waterline, and I heard the hull split open like a tin can. The lights went out completely this time, and in the darkness I could hear water rushing in like a waterfall. Something heavy crashed down from above, and the last thing I remember was the taste of blood and salt water as everything went black around me. I woke up in complete blackness with ice-cold water climbing up my legs. The sonar room was totally wrecked. Twisted metal dangled from above like jagged fangs, and my console threw off sparks every few seconds, making strange shapes dance across the flooded walls. My skull felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. When I pressed my forehead, my fingertips came back slick with blood. The water had reached my knees and kept climbing. Red emergency lights blinked on and off, showing me quick snapshots of the chaos. Equipment had ripped free from the walls and now drifted around me like dangerous junk. I heard people shouting from other sections of the ship, but their voices seemed far away and underwater. I pushed through the wreckage toward what used to be the door. The corridor outside was chaos, water gushing in from somewhere, sparks flying from busted electrical panels, and the whole ship angled so steep that walking felt like scaling a mountain. "Help! Someone help me!" The voice came from behind me, back in the sonar room. I spun around and found Petty Officer Martinez, pinned beneath a collapsed beam, water climbing toward his chest. My body moved before my brain caught up. I splashed back through the flooding compartment and grabbed the twisted metal. The thing weighed a ton, but I managed to move it just enough for him to wriggle free. "Thanks, Francis," he gasped, blood running from a cut on his scalp. "Thought I was done for." We moved toward the main corridor together, Martinez leaning on me since his left leg had given out. The ship creaked around us like it was dying, and I could feel us sinking deeper with each minute that passed. That's where I spotted Aguilar helping wounded sailors get to the upper decks. Her uniform was ripped, and she had a dark bruise spread across her cheek, but she was still moving, still fighting. She looked up at me with dark eyes. 14 confirmed dead, 8 missing. We're going down faster than the pumps can handle it. "What about the creature?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Still out there, circling us according to what sensors we have left." She gestured toward a sailor with a broken arm. "Help me get him topside." We formed a human chain, passing the wounded up through the angled corridors toward the deck. But even as we worked, I could see the defeat in everyone's faces. The ship was dying beneath us, and that thing was still in the water, waiting. Captain Reynolds appeared carrying emergency beacon gear, his uniform soaked and his face set in hard lines. "Francis, I need you to help me get the distress transmitter working. I don't care what our orders say about radio silence." I looked at Aguilar, who nodded. "Go. I can handle this." Reynolds and I battled our way to the communications room through corridors that had turned into slippery slopes. The ship kept tilting worse every minute, and I grabbed onto anything I could find to avoid sliding into the rising water. The communications room was wrecked. Most of the equipment was either underwater or throwing off dangerous sparks. But Reynolds went straight to a sealed emergency case mounted on the wall and pulled out a compact transmitter about the size of a briefcase. "This might mean a court-martial for both of us," he said, connecting cables with practiced efficiency. "But I'm not letting my crew die for some classified bullshit." I helped him set up the emergency beacon, holding components steady while he worked. The captain's hands stayed rock steady even as everything fell apart around us. "We're going to broadcast on every Navy frequency we can reach," he explained. "Someone will hear us, and someone will come." The ship groaned and shook as something massive slammed into us again. Everything went black for about 10 seconds, and in that darkness, I could hear water pouring in somewhere below us. "Almost got it," Reynolds muttered, making final connections by feel. "Just need to activate the creature smashed straight into the communications array overhead. The blast was deafening, and the shock wave sent us both flying across the angled deck. I crashed into the far wall hard enough to see stars, and when I looked up, Reynolds was trapped under a fallen support beam. "Captain!" I crawled over to him, but the beam was too heavy to move alone. "The beacon!" he gasped, pointing toward the transmitter. "Activated. Red switch." I could see the device had taken damage in the explosion, but the activation panel was still working. My fingers found the red switch as another hit rocked the ship. "Do it, Francis. Get the word out." I flipped the switch just as the ship tilted past the point of no return. Water rushed into the communications room like a waterfall, and the last thing I saw was Captain Reynolds giving me a thumbs up as everything went black and the ship started its final plunge into the depths. The beacon was transmitting. Someone would hear us. Someone would know what happened here. I opened my eyes to white ceiling tiles and the steady beep of medical equipment. My mouth tasted like I'd been chewing on pennies for a week, and every muscle in my body felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Multiple trucks, actually. The IV tube in my arm tugged when I tried to sit up, so I stayed flat and took stock instead. Bandages covered my head where something had sliced my forehead. My ribs were taped up tight, making each breath a careful exercise. Both arms were covered in purple bruises that looked like abstract art. But I was alive. Somehow. A nurse showed up next to my bed, checking the monitors like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "Good. You're awake." How are you feeling?" "Like I got run over by a submarine," I croaked. She smiled and made notes on a chart. "That's actually not far from the truth, according to your file. You've been unconscious for 3 days. The doctor will want to check you over now that you're awake." 3 days. I tried to remember what happened after the ship started sinking, but everything after hitting that beacon switch was just black water and chaos. How did I end up here? How did I make it when Captain Reynolds and so many others didn't? The doctor was a Navy commander with gentle eyes who tested my pupils with a small light and asked me to track his finger. Basic concussion checks. He seemed happy with how I responded and told me I'd taken a decent knock to the head, banged up some ribs, and gotten pretty cold from being in the water too long. "You're lucky to be alive," he said, updating my chart. 12 hours in Pacific waters at night. Most people wouldn't have made it half that long. 12 hours. I had no memory of floating in dark water for 12 hours, waiting for rescue that might never come. On my 3rd day of being awake, Admiral Turner walked into my room carrying a manila folder and wearing the same expression I remembered from that first meeting in Building C. He pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down without saying anything for a long moment. "Petty Officer Francis," he finally said, "I'm glad to see you're recovering." "Sir." My voice still sounded rough. "What happened? How did I survive?" "A Navy rescue helicopter responded to your distress signal. They found you and Petty Officer Aguilar clinging to debris approximately 12 hours after SSV-1 went under." His tone was matter-of-fact, like he was reading from a report. "You were both unconscious when they pulled you from the water." Aguilar was alive. Relief hit me so hard I nearly broke down crying right there in front of the Admiral. "Is she okay?" "Similar injuries to yours. She's recovering in another ward." Turner opened his folder and pulled out several documents. "I need to discuss some important matters with you while you're coherent." I knew what was coming before he said it. 29 crew members were lost with the ship, including Captain Reynolds and Dr. Hunt. The creature's current whereabouts are unknown. He paused, letting that sink in. "I want to remind you of the oath you took before this assignment. That oath remains in effect regardless of what happened out there." The burden of keeping quiet pressed down on me again, worse than the tight bandages wrapped around my ribs. 29 people were gone, including the captain, who'd tried to save us all by breaking radio silence. And I could never tell anyone what really killed them. "Any discussion of the mission, the creature, or SSV-1 will result in federal prosecution," Turner continued. "More importantly, it could endanger ongoing operations and put other personnel at risk." "Ongoing operations?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Turner's eyes grew cold. "That's not your concern anymore, Petty Officer." He handed me a stack of papers from his folder. "Official records will show that you served aboard a classified research vessel that experienced mechanical failure during routine operations. The details of that failure are classified, but the basic facts are sufficient for any future inquiries." I stared at the documents. They looked official enough, complete with Navy letterhead and stamps, but they described a completely different reality. According to these papers, I'd been injured when our ship's engine room exploded due to equipment malfunction. No mention of something massive rising from the depths to crush our hull like a tin can. "After 2 weeks of recovery and psychological evaluation, you'll receive an honorable medical discharge due to injuries sustained in service," Turner explained. "Your benefits will be processed normally, and you'll be free to pursue civilian opportunities." Medical discharge. My Navy career was over before it really started, ended by something that officially never existed. "What about the creature?" I asked quietly. Turner stayed quiet for a long moment, watching my face. "What creature, Petty Officer?" The message was clear. I looked down at the discharge papers, seeing my future laid out in official language that erased the truth of what happened. In 2 weeks, I'd walk out of here and try to build a normal life while carrying secrets that would eat at me forever. I understand, sir. I hope you do. Turner stood and collected his folder. The creature remains active in Pacific waters. Your silence protects both national security and your own safety. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share. He stopped at the door, glancing back at me with what looked like pity. Get well, Francis. Try to build a good life for yourself. And remember, what happened out there stays out there. After he left, I sat in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling tiles and thinking about Captain Reynolds pinned under that beam, giving me a thumbs up as the ship went down. He'd broken radio silence to save his crew, and it worked. 2 of us made it home. But home didn't feel the same now. The world had changed, knowing what was swimming in the dark water beyond the continental shelf. I shut my eyes and tried not to think about sonar readings or the sound of twisting metal. But those memories were seared into my brain forever. In 2 weeks, I'd be a civilian again, free to do whatever I wanted, go wherever I chose, as long as I never talked about the most important thing that had ever happened to me. The monitors kept beeping their steady rhythm, marking time until I could leave this place and figure out how to live with secrets that felt heavier than the ocean itself. I sat in the back row of Marine Biology 250, staring at my blank notebook while Professor Chen clicked through slides about deep-sea biodiversity. 6 months since my discharge, and I still couldn't make myself take notes about anything that lived below 1,000 feet. The abyssal zone remains largely unexplored, Chen was saying, her voice carrying that academic excitement I used to share. We estimate that 90% of deep-sea species remain undiscovered. My pen stayed motionless. Around me, 23 graduate students scribbled eagerly, probably dreaming of the same research opportunities that had once driven me to enlist. They saw mystery and wonder in the deep ocean. I saw something else entirely. Chen moved to the next slide and my stomach dropped. Pacific depth charts filled the projection screen, showing the exact coordinates where SSV-1 had gone down. The same underwater canyon system where something massive had risen from the depths to crush our hull like aluminum foil. This region has shown particularly interesting sonar anomalies, Chen continued, pointing to areas I recognized with sick familiarity. Several research vessels have reported unusual acoustic signatures that don't match any known species. The classroom walls felt like they were closing in. I could hear the steady beep of sonar in my head, the sound of contact bearing 090, range decreasing, something huge moving at incredible speed through dark water. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door, ignoring the curious looks from other students. Chen paused mid-sentence as I pushed through the exit, but I couldn't stop to explain. How could I tell her that those unusual acoustic signatures had killed 29 people? The hallway was empty and quiet, but my hands were still shaking. I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe normally, the way the VA counselor had taught me. Count to 10. Focus on what's around you. Remember that you're safe. Except I wasn't safe. None of us were. That thing was still out there, still hunting. And I was the only one who knew what ships were really facing when they vanished without a trace. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. How are classes going? Dad wants to know if you're enjoying marine biology again. I looked at the message for a long time before typing back. It's different than I expected. That night, I sat in my studio apartment near campus, surrounded by textbooks I couldn't bring myself to open. The walls were covered with marine life posters I'd hung up trying to recapture my old enthusiasm. But now the deep-sea creatures looked threatening instead of fascinating. Every tentacle, every set of teeth, Every streamlined predator body reminded me of sonar contacts that moved too fast and hit too hard. I tried explaining my problems to Dr. Martinez at the VA clinic, but the conversation always hit the same wall. "Can you tell me more about this naval accident?" she'd asked during our last session. "Equipment malfunction. Engine room explosion. That's all I can say." "But you mentioned nightmares about something in the water. Can you describe what you see?" I'd sat there for half a minute, thinking about Admiral Turner's warnings regarding federal prosecution and ongoing operations. "I can't discuss operational details." Dr. Martinez had taken notes with the patient look of someone who'd handled classified trauma before, but we both knew she couldn't help with what I wouldn't describe. How do you process survivor's guilt when you can't explain what you survived? My laptop chimed with an encrypted email notification. Only one person had this address. The message came from an account called Deepwater 47, Aguilar's service number. We'd set up this way of talking during my last week in the hospital, both of us knowing we'd need someone who got it. "Still having the dreams," her message read. "Saw a news report about a missing fishing boat near the Aleutians. Same pattern. No distress call, no debris, just gone. It's still hunting, isn't it?" I typed back. "Probably. Can't stop thinking about those depth charts in class today. Professor showed the exact coordinates. You're taking marine biology classes? That's brave. Or crazy. Trying to get back to who I was before, not working." There was a long pause before her next message appeared. "Maybe we can't go back. Maybe we're different now." She was right, and I'd been fighting that truth for months. The Justin Francis who'd enlisted with dreams of studying whale songs and mapping coral reefs was gone, replaced by someone who jumped at sonar sounds and couldn't look at ocean depth charts without seeing hunting grounds. "Sometimes I dream about it moving beneath container ships," Aguilar continued, "choosing which one to take next, like it's playing with us." I shut the laptop and walked to my window, staring out at the lights of San Diego. Somewhere beyond the harbor, past the continental shelf, something enormous was moving through the darkness. It had sampled human technology and found it laughably fragile. The electromagnetic pulses meant to stop it had been nothing more than irritating sparks. My phone rang, making me jump. Mom's contact photo filled the screen. Her smiling face from last Christmas, back when I still thought I'd be serving on a research submarine, helping expand human knowledge of the ocean. "Hi, Mom." "Justin, honey, you sound tired. Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine. Just studying. Your father and I are so proud of you for going back to school. We know the Navy didn't work out the way you planned, but marine biology was always your first love." I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass. "Yeah, it's just not like I remembered." "Different how?" I watched a Coast Guard cutter cross the harbor, its lights slicing through the dark. The crew probably felt secure, confident in their training and gear. They had no clue what was really swimming in the deep water beyond their sonar's reach. "The ocean's bigger than I thought," I said finally, "and we understand less about it than we pretend." Mom was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like something your grandfather might have said. He always talked about the ocean like it held mysteries." My grandfather's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, marking time that felt different now. He'd taken classified secrets to his grave, and now I understood why he'd stayed silent. Some knowledge couldn't be shared, even with the people you loved most. "I should let you get back to studying," Mom said. "But call us this weekend, okay? We miss you." After she hung up, I sat in the dark apartment thinking about the textbooks I couldn't read and the research I couldn't pursue. Every paper about deep-sea predators felt like a lie by omission. Every discussion of unknown species ignored the most important unknown of all. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to my academic advisor, requesting a transfer to freshwater ecology. Lakes and rivers felt safer somehow, with shores you could actually see. The deep ocean held too many secrets, and I already carried more of them than I could handle. The cursor blinked in the message field as I tried to find words that wouldn't give anything away. How do you explain that you can't study marine biology because you know too much about what lives down there? How do you say that the ocean, which once meant wonder and discovery, now only brought fear? I deleted the draft and closed the laptop. Tomorrow I'd sit in the back of another lecture, trying to pretend that academic discussions of marine life didn't bring back the sound of crushing metal and the memory of something massive moving through dark water at unbelievable speed. Outside my window, the Pacific stretched endlessly toward the horizon, beautiful and terrifying and full of things that humanity wasn't ready to understand. I was 23 years old, and I already knew more about the ocean's secrets than I could handle. The watch on my wrist kept ticking, counting down moments until I'd have to face another day of pretending the world was smaller and safer than it really was.